Is it about to be Dame time in Lawrence, Kansas, going after Dame Sar, one of the top prospects from the international ranks? Where do things stand? How would he fit in with KU? We discuss on today's episode of the show.
You are Locked On Jayhawks, your daily podcast on the Kansas Jayhawks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on? Derek Johnson here. This is Locked On Jayhawks. Thanks for making it your first listen every day. Thank you to the everydayers catching each and every episode of the show. We are free and available anywhere you get your podcast, including on our YouTube page where you can like and subscribe to the show. And thanks for tuning in as we've got some fun, possible new portal names emerging, I guess. Name for KU with Dame Sar. We're going to break down his game on today's episode of the show. How he would fit in with Kansas. We'll also get into some of the latest in the transfer portal and then finish up with a little other KU sports with, KU golf and KU baseball, some news there as well. Today's episode of the show is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year with Monarch Money. So Dame Sar, he is you can't call him a transfer portal prospect, right? Because he's not. So this isn't, a portal target for KU, but he is a recruit. I guess he'd be a freshman coming in, but somebody who comes from the international ranks, which we've seen Kansas have, good success with. It's not something that they've done at a very high rate, but when they have gone international, a lot of times it's worked pretty well. I mean, Johnny Furphy, obviously coming from Australia, ended up having a solid freshman season for KU, ended up being an NBA draft pick. Svi Mikhailuk obviously worked out very well down, the road as started to get more playing time, really junior, senior year, when he really had his breakout season for KU. If you count international guys as guys who were just born in other continents, I mean, you think of Joel Embiid and Udoka Azubuike, Sasha Khan being from Russia, like Kansas has had a good amount of success when they have done it. They haven't always done it, but going overseas. And Dame Sar represents that opportunity here for Kansas. And so this kind of developed recently where it was like, okay, Kansas is making a push on this kid. I don't know if it was in relation to, there were some opportunities available now, or he was thought of going to this school and then something else happened. Like Illinois and Duke were two schools that were seen as being in the thick of things in the Dame Sar, race. Well, Illinois lands Andrei Stojakovic, who's kind of a wing who would play a lot of minutes and probably takes a sizable amount of NIL. Duke is going to be landing Cedric Coward unless he stays in the NBA draft. So that possibly takes them, from wing minutes and NIL money there. And so Kansas and Oregon seem to be kind of in the thick of things here. And so it kind of becomes interesting. Now, I also find it interesting that I think Illinois is a Nike school, but Duke is obviously a Nike school and very high up on the Nike ladder. Oregon is the Nike ladder, right? And this kid played in the Nike Hoop Summit. Where does that put Kansas? At the same point in time, he's an international recruit. So, maybe it just doesn't really matter. He didn't grow up on the Nike or Adidas or Under Armour or pick a shoe company circuit. That wasn't him. He just happened to be there, right? That could just be connecting dots that aren't really a thing. But he is of Senegalese descent and he is born in Italy. So, his nationality, Senegal/Italy. I would imagine that means that his parents are from there, but he was born in Italy specifically. He's going to turn 19 years old in June, and he was actually scooped up as a teenager by FC Barcelona. The European track of things works a little bit differently when you're talking about, I don't know, the developmental level and how things go. And so basically he ends up on the B team at FC Barcelona, which is one of the best teams, in Europe, basically for basketball. And then in 2023, late 2023, he starts getting some sporadic appearances with the varsity team. He began with the varsity team for the first time this season. He even had a 21-point game in March. So he was starting to really take off and find himself as an 18-year-old for even the varsity team. But then there was, a little bit of controversy. So I mentioned going to Nike Hoop Summit, and Sar went to Nike Hoop Summit in April of 2025, and Barcelona tried to deny his request to do so. They released a statement acknowledging that his actions regarding them as a breach of his obligations. Barcelona and Sar would ultimately reach an agreement to part ways on April 17th of 2025, with Sar being left off the team's roster for the remainder of the season. They didn't want him going to Nike Hoop Summit. I don't know if it's because missing the season or whatever, but there was also a story that they agreed that he would be allowed to go to Nike Hoop Summit in like winter of 2024, like November or something like that of 2024. And they changed their mind on it because he was playing so well that they were like, no, we don't want this kid, winding up at a college or one of these other things. Like, we want to develop him more time and have him be a part of our team a little bit longer. Right. So that was kind of weird that happened, but he also made his Italian national team debut in November of 2024. He is, by the way, if you're wondering, like, what position does this kid play? He's a shooting guard wing type, I guess you would list him at. Can be an off-ball player, 6'6". You could play him a little bit on ball. I think he has some dribbling and passing and athletic abilities to be able to do that. I think more so you want him a little bit off ball. In fact, I was talking to somebody who does some NBA draft stuff, and I was like, what do you think about this kid? And he was like, oh yeah, I think he's a very good off-ball player. And had him in his late first area for the 2026 draft. So this is a very high potential kid. And they did measurements at the Nike Hoop Summit. He measured 6'7.5". I've seen most places list him at 6'6", but at the Nike Hoop Summit, he measured 6'7.5". Now, I don't know if the Nike Hoop Summit measures with or without shoes. Maybe he's 6'6" without shoes. Maybe he's 6'7.5" with shoes. I don't know what it is, but like, that's pretty darn impressive that would be his height. He's 189 pounds, so, a little slight of frame there. 8 foot and 9.5 inch standing reach. A very impressive 6'11" 3/4 wingspan, so almost a 7-foot wingspan. He had 9-inch hand length and 10.25 inch hand width. You might be wondering, okay, what do all these measurements mean? I just hear numbers. I don't know what those mean. Okay. If we compare Dame Sar's measurements at the Nike Hoop Summit to those of 2024 NBA Draft Combine invitees, his standing reach, Sar's, was 5th of what would have been 26 small forwards, or if you view him as a shooting guard, would have been 1st by a landslide in standing reach. It was tied 4th among 26 small forwards for wingspan. And again, if you compare him to shooting guards, it would have been 1st. His hand length tied 17th, but only 2 small forwards and 0 guards ahead of him. His hand width tied 13th along all positions, with Zach Edey leading the field at 10.75 inch hand width. He was only 0.5 inch hand width smaller than gigantic Zach Edey. But overall, that means that Dame Sar's measurements, he's taller than Kevin McCullough or Harrison Ingram. He has a standing reach 0.5 inch shorter than JT Toppin. He has an inch or bigger wingspan than Kyle Filipowski and Jameer Watkins. He has the hand length of Oso Ighodaro from Marquette, and he has the hand width of Donovan Clingan, the first-round center prospect from UConn. All of that in a off-guard / wing skill set. That is quite the potential. That is quite the ball of clay, so to speak, to mold if you are Bill Self. Now, it's difficult when we get to a stat discussion or conversation on this. This isn't as easy as some other transfer portal prospects where I can go, he averaged 14 points per game. He shot really well from the corner. He did this well in fast break or whatever. It's not that same level because the level he was playing at, the senior level of, Spain. I mean, Spain might be the best European league out there. I don't know. It's like Greece, Spain, are up there, like, Russia, like the Turkey. There's some really good international leagues. Spain is certainly up there, and FC Barcelona is one of the toughest. That level of play is going to inherently be more difficult than the NCAA. And also you're playing with a bunch, especially in Barcelona, playing with guys who are, 29, 30, 35 years old, right? And so you end up being in a situation where, you're not going to play like a ton necessarily. And we've seen this before. If you're a fan of the NBA draft, sometimes you'll see guys playing or get drafted in like the first round or in the lottery who played on their European team and they only got 5 minutes per game. And it's like, no, but it's projecting out how good he's going to be. And so like you look at a team like this where it's like, okay, they had Jabari Parker and Jan Vesely, who's a former first-round pick, and Justin Anderson, who I think was a former first-round pick with Virginia, and Raul Neto, who was a former longtime NBA guy, Thomas Satoransky, Alex Abrines, Chemezi Mateo, Willie Hernan Gomez. These are a lot of former NBA players who are, like I said, around 28, 30, 32 years old. It's going to be really hard for an 18-year-old to get on the court a bunch. So you end up with more limited stats. You end up with a guy who played 15 games in EuroLeague play, but just 5 minutes per game this past season, and 12 games at 13 minutes per game in La Liga, which is the top league for Spain over there. So it's hard to take everything, but if we do look at those 12 games he played in La Liga, 5.8 points per game and 12.8 minutes per game, 1.7 rebounds, 0.7 assists, 0.8 turnovers. So more turnover to assist numbers than you'd like to see, but that's where the off-ball stuff comes in. But 52% from the floor, 43% from three on 1.8 attempts per game, but only 56% on free throws. Now, if you take his total career numbers at the senior level, which counts 3 games in 2023, a couple in 23-24, and then those 27 games between EuroLeague and League Ball, 34 games played at the senior level for Dame Sar for FC Barcelona, you're talking 50% from the field, 50.6%, 37% from three. Again, the free throw shooting, not good, 46%. So they're going to have to figure that out. But it is also a limited sample size, 11 of 24. The 3-point shooting, 14 of 38. It's all limited sample size, but like percentages do at least sound good based on what you're going out of. Now you watch some highlights and you read up scouting reports on this kid. I think pretty decent spot up shooter, but again, needs to get more consistent at it. You're looking for the free throw shooting to get a little bit better. I think vertically, like if you're talking about him being an athlete vertically, I would call him an average athlete there. I think honestly, you see more of his length in the vertical aspect of the game than you do see his jumping ability. But if you're talking athleticism from like a speed, quickness standpoint, this dude is a great athlete from that standpoint. I haven't seen like a vertical number that he has, but again, if you watch some of the film, you would say, kind of an average jumper. But again, when you're talking first step, when you're talking quickness, when you're talking speed, when you're talking ability to change directions with a quick speed while doing so, if you're doing a Euro step or if you're juking one way or another, or cutting one way or another, this dude is a great athlete from that standpoint. Very good speed. And especially then once you add to the fact of all that length we talked about and the 6'6" frame. So how exactly would he fit in with KU? And then we'll get to some latest portal news and more. This is Locked On Jayhawks. Today's episode of the show is brought to you by Supply House. Get the supplies you need from the site made for skilled trades, Supply House. Whether you're in plumbing, HVAC, or electrical work, Supply House is the reliable way to order products online. Their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done right. Plus, with a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts from 400-plus top brands, you'll find exactly what you need delivered fast from coast to coast. Need help with an order? Supply House offers expert support and industry-leading service, so you'll always talk to a real person. And for trade pros looking for an extra edge, their free TradeMaster program offers exclusive perks like a dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every order. Thousands of skilled professionals are already taking advantage. Now it's your turn. Join the TradeMaster program today at supplyhouse.com/TM and start ordering plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies with just a few clicks. Plus, use promo code S-H-5 for 5% off your first order. That is supplyhouse.com. All right, continuing on this episode of Locked On Jayhawks, talking a little Dame Sar, and then we'll get to the latest news with KU and the transfer portal. So how exactly would Sar fit in with Kansas? Again, you're talking about a very lengthy player. You're talking about a very quick and fast player. You're talking about a player who has shown some ability to hit spot up threes and a player with very high potential for what he could become, as well as an off-ball player. All those things sound great to me, right? Because if you're talking about a Kansas team, you have to be able to play off ball because we are all expecting Darren Peterson to get the heavy load of the ball in his hands, right? And there still is room, as we've talked about many times, for multiple guys to have the ball in their hands and make plays. But still, if you, for instance, you take the Frank Mason, Devontae Graham team, Devontae had the ball in his hands a good amount to make plays, but Frank was still the primary guy. And that's how you would kind of view it for KU. Like, Darren Peterson will be the guy primary. There's room for somebody else to have the ball in their hands a fair amount, though, too. That could be Melvin Council. That could be a guy like Dame Sar, whatever. But with Sar, you have versatility because you can play him at really the 2 through 4. I think lengthwise, again, if you're going through some of the height stuff, him being 6'7.5", hypothetically, him having a good standing reach, him having a near 7-foot wingspan with big hands. From a length perspective, he can get away with playing a college 4, no problem. Now, he's only 189 pounds, though. That makes it a little more difficult. So if you're playing a team who has more of a like power forward type at the 4, or somebody who's 230 pounds, you probably can't play him at the 4 in that matchup because he'll just get bullied on the inside and try to box him out rebounding wise. But in most matchups against teams who are playing wings, which I would say a good majority of teams you're going to play that way, right? For instance, if you're playing Arkansas in the first round like they did, where they're playing 6'10" at the 4, yeah, you don't want them playing the 4. But if you're playing more of a wing type team again, where you're playing, I don't know, like a Baylor, for instance, you can get away with playing him at the 4. But again, I think a majority of his minutes would come at the 2 and at the 3. And honestly, I think a majority of the minutes would come at the 3, because if you're looking at Darren Peterson as a 1, okay, Marco Jackson gets some minutes at the 1 and 2. And then Melvin Council gets some minutes at the 2. And I guess even as possibly a backup 1. And then Jaden Dawson can get some minutes at the 2 and 3. I think it makes more sense to have Sar play a majority of minutes at the 3. He can get some at the 4. He can get some at the 2 as well for you. Now, how much he plays at the 2 might depend on the 3-point shooting necessarily, but this would be an interesting one because it's a combination of like floor and ceiling, right? What is the floor here? The floor here is an athletic, lengthy dude who is basically like a Tristan Enaruna on steroids as more of a true wing type, which that's like a rotation player. The ceiling here is if he is indeed somebody who, because again, you're talking about somebody who in this draft, like I was looking, ESPN had him ranked 31st if he would have stayed in this draft. He ended up not pulled out of the NBA draft combine and stuff like that. But 31st. And again, I talked to somebody who had him in the first round for 2026. That's not the only guy doing that. There are many people who are projecting him to be a first round pick in 2026. If the ceiling hits, you're not just talking about, 6th, 7th, 8th man or a 5th starter. You're talking about, again, the floor being that 5th through 8th man, the ceiling being he is your second best player on the team. He is next to Darren Peterson, even more than Flory. And the ceiling hits, and then you could potentially even have 3 first-round picks with Peterson, Flory, and Sar. And the ceiling here looks like, okay, you have this athletic dude. The shooting translates over. He figures out the free throw shooting. He's athletic as all get up. He's got the length to bother teams on the defensive end. And that's kind of the big thing here, too. If you look at a lineup of having Peterson, who's like 6'5" with a 6'10" wingspan, Council or Dawson, both good defenders at the 2, Sar at the 3, who's lengthy and a good defender, White at the 4, and Flory at the 5, that would be one of the most switchable defensive lineups in the country. Sure, you wouldn't have like a gargantuan dude out there, but you would have 0 people who are small, and it would be very versatile. It'd be very switchable. It'd be a lot of guys with really long wingspans, right? I mean, Peterson, 6'10" wingspan. Sar, almost 7-foot wingspan. Flory, like 7'2" wingspan. Tiller coming off the bench with like a 7'2" wingspan. That would be the name of the game for this Kansas team. And that would be a lot of fun for what they could do defensively with some of that switching ability. And then on the offensive end of the floor, like, even if he's not, a 40, whatever 3-point shooter, like if he's 35% 3-point shooter, that still does help from where this team is in needing their 3-point shooting. And again, if we keep going back to the idea, you want to be more athletic, Dame Sar kind of fits that mode. So the big challenge here to me, Dame Sar is absolutely a take. I loved watching the kid's highlights. I love what level of basketball he's coming from, that this will not be, this is almost like transferring down to a certain extent. And I look at it from a standpoint of like, what do you do with this and Darrion Williams? That's the big challenge to me. This is not a challenge of, do you take Dame Sar? You do in a heartbeat. The challenge becomes if there are limited NIL funds, if you have only enough room to bring on one more splash play, and then the rest of the plays are, either developmental or backup big or whatever, and you have to choose between Dame Sar or Darrion Williams or RJ Lewis or, Jameer Watkins or whatever, who do you choose and why? And I think with Darrion Williams, you have more of a known commodity again in the college game. Dame Sar, again, could come over and he could give you 7 points per game, right? And be a good defender and end up being your 5th or 6th man for all we know, right? And the potential could just not end up working out. I really like what I saw, though. I really like the athleticism. I really like the potential. I like the ability that he can handle a little bit. I like the ability to play off ball. And if you're just talking pure potential and ceiling, nobody's going to be higher than what you would get possibly with Dame Sar. And the idea that, okay, you could say, oh, but they've recruited well for fit. Why should they go for just the highest potential? This is different than those, because here's the thing that's going to keep Dame Sar's floor up: the athleticism and the ability to turn that athleticism into defense. Having that ultra switchable lineup. I mean, there could be a real case that if you add Dame Sar, you will be the best defense in the country. Okay. And so I don't know where I would sit. Maybe you could swing it both for Sar and Williams. I don't know that I would buy into that notion. If you did, that'd certainly be a lot of fun. And you know, I said Darrion Williams. He's my favorite player in the portal. I really like Dame Sar. I'll just put it that way. And I'm having trouble picking which one would go where. So I guess here's the deal. If they're that close to me, whichever one says they're ready to come first, you take that one and then you move on from there. I guess that's kind of where I'm at. Like, I don't view Dame Sar, even if I would say, okay, maybe I would view Darrion Williams as number one, Dame Sar as number two, and then X guy is number three. I don't think the gap between, even though the games are so different, between Sar and Williams is enough for me to be like, if Sar wants to commit right now, do you tell him, I'd love to take it, but we have to wait on Williams? I would just take it and then try to figure stuff out from there. But, you know, in an ideal world, you get everybody. Yeah. Okay. Let's finish up with a little latest in the portal and a little unfortunate weekend for KU baseball. Today's episode of the show is brought to you by Monarch Money. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in. Your personal CFO giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So you just stop managing your money, you start building wealth. It has easy collaboration where managing your money with your partner is smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, stay on the same page without the stress. Take the control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONCollege for half off your first year with Monarch Money. All right, finishing up on this episode of the show. Other latest portal news: Paul Mbia, who was another international player, who was one that KU had some sort of connection, rumors with at some point. Seems like that stuff kind of slowed. Ends up going to NC State. He was somebody I liked his tape, especially if he would have been that backup big role, but obviously he'll go to NC State there. Also, Rylan Griffin, former Jayhawk, picked his new school, Texas A&M. So it'll be the Texas A&M Jayhawks with Rylan Griffin and Zach Clements this next season. And that former Samford coach is there as well. Also, the NBA Combine announced their invitees. 75 invitees went out. Of note to Kansas. Now, no Jayhawks were part of that list, which I think Michael Swain put out, is the first time since like 2009 that has happened, which is pretty crazy. And then that'll be May 11th to May 18th, which is important to note from like a decision standpoint as we await some of these guys. But Darrion Williams, RJ Lewis, and Jameer Watkins, all possible portal targets for KU, did get invited. So all players to watch to see how they do and what their decisions would end up being. They also announced, I think it was 44 was the number of prospects that were invited to the G League Ignite Combine, which those players get an opportunity to play their way up to the NBA Combine based on how they perform. And so that means basically 120 players invited to both of these combined. Kansas didn't have a single one. So you could go from not having a single one, which again is very rare for Kansas, and I think just kind of shows where we were at this season. As much as we might want to blame the fit or not doing this or that right, you also didn't have enough talent on the roster. And that's something you have an opportunity to change, because Darren Peterson could be the number one pick in the draft. Flory with a good season could be a first-round pick or at least an NBA draft pick. Maybe you bring in Dame Sar, you could say the same thing. Maybe you bring in a Darrion Williams or one of these kids, and they could say the same thing. Like, you have much more potential to kind of hit on some of those on some of those NBA possible guys on this year's team. So that'll be something to watch, though, because, how they do is going to determine, do they come back to college? Will they have a chance to KU? And all that sort of thing. KU baseball did not have a great weekend, by the way. They got swept by Cincinnati, and now they kind of fall into the pack in a crowded Big 12 for the baseball standings. And, it's obviously still a great season for KU baseball, and they're going to have an opportunity to play in the postseason and stuff. This was kind of an opportunity in trying to avoid this to and they're not mathematically out of it or anything, but really stick around for having a chance to win the Big 12 in the regular season. Now they're tied third with Arizona. Arizona State's a game up, and then West Virginia is 4 games up from them in Arizona, but TCU's tied with them too. Kansas State's only a game back. Cincinnati's now only 2 games back. So certainly puts them back toward more of the middle of the field, but I'm sure they'll bounce back. They bounced back well before when they got swept by TCU, and then they won a handful of games straight after that. So they'll look to do that toward the end of the season now here. And then finally, Kansas men's golf, 9th straight NCAA regional selection, which is a new program record. They're heading over to Washington from May 12th to 14th as the number 8 seed. So cool to see as, I guess, Gary Woodland and the boys doing well for the KU golf program. All right, that'll do it for this episode of Locked On Jayhawks. Make sure to subscribe to the show. Catch the show anywhere you get your podcasts, including on our YouTube page. We'll be back at you. More Portal talk on tomorrow's episode of the show. See you then.